Welcome to Brainthropology. Let's talk about our amazing brain and the issues that get us stuck. We all have those moments where life gets overwhelming. It can be related to injury or illness, or an issue with your kids, or just because life is crazy and we need a little help and encouragement. Our team of therapists, expert guests, and clients are here to deep dive into the topics that matter most. We will share information with our listeners that encourages, educates, and empowers. We discuss and provide practical tools and strategies to change lives. We invite you into our community. But be prepared. This listener community is built through vulnerability and might at times be raw and emotional. We are here to provide free hope and support to those who need it most. Our Brainthropology team includes creative and inspirational board-certified occupational therapists, Courtney Wang, Dr. Jessica Smith, Debbie Loftus, and host Meg Scaling.
This episode is brought to you by Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center, helping clients live their best lives by implementing strategies such as those discussed in this podcast. Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center is located in Ann Arbor, Michigan, serving southeastern Michigan for in-person and community-based services. Out-of-state virtual and teletherapy services available for OT, PT, speech, mental health, and mindfulness. Check out their website at galaxybraincenter.com.
Welcome to Brainthropology. I'm your host and occupational therapist, CEO of Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center, Meg Scaling. I'm here with an incredible team. This team created the podcast Brainthropology. I am so excited to be here in studio with you all, and I want to take a minute to thank you, Wayne Media and the Speakeasy Podcast Network. This studio is absolutely beautiful. The sound, the production team, we are very blessed to be here. I learned about this from being a guest on Jason Tracy's show, Coffee and Grit, and he interviewed me and my first client and our Galaxy origin story. So I really encourage the Brainthropology listeners to log on to Coffee and Grit, and we will put that link in our show notes because it is truly inspiring. Today, though, we are here to talk about this unique podcast that I think we have been dreaming up for so many years. And this team I'm about to talk about today is a team that definitely is, we're not here by chance. And we have worked together for over 12 years. This is a small piece of a bigger picture that we have had for a very, very long time. And the women that I'm going to introduce to you today have already changed lives and saved lives. And we really hope that the listeners also can connect and have their lives changed as well. The women here have inspired me, and I think we truly inspire each other. So it's interesting to me that even though we met on Craigslist, Debbie, I think, was my first Craigslist applicant that got the job with Galaxy, and Courtney was my second.
Can I add that I finished my job interview that I found on Craigslist in your minivan?
Correct, because we're OTs and we do what we need to do.
And there was a kid there too.
Right, right. Good. Yeah, I was going to interview Courtney and my babysitter didn't show up, and I had a 15-month-old that wouldn't stop crying. Yeah. So, Courtney, what did we do?
We chatted in Panera. He started crying too much, so you said, hey, there's a TV in my van. Do you want to sit in my minivan? And I said, yes, of course, because it was obviously we were meant to be together. So
for sure.
Not a problem.
For sure. And I think, Debbie, when I interviewed you, your husband told you what?
Was a little concerned that I was meeting for a job interview at Panera and had me tracked to make sure that this was legit.
Right.
Definitely a first job interview at Panera.
So that was probably before Craigslist got a bad reputation, but we've been at this a long time. Jessica, we met you through Roseanne.
Yeah, and I had a fancy interview at an office. So
Very respectable.
absolutely. It was a tiny little office, but it was an office.
There we go. Well, I tell you, we get better as time goes on.
Upgrade.
That's right. So we're really here to talk about this unique podcast, Brainthropology. And we've always felt like we needed to share the knowledge with people outside of Michigan. And I really think that what's unique about this podcast is that we really also feel that each listener is a part of our story. Each client and person we've ever treated is a part of our story as a therapist because we learn from them, we become inspired from them, they become a part of our lives. And we really feel very confident that our listening audience will also feel that. So I think it's also real important to talk about the fact that we've seen it all. And if anyone wants to share a brief picture of what you have seen that you thought you would never see as a therapist, that would be really interesting.
I think we can go to my very first day on the job.
Oh, yeah.
I was with Debbie, and here I am, an eager, OT, ready to start my first day here at, my first really second job. And I met with Debbie, we rode together, and she's like, we have a challenging first client, just, make sure that you're dressing appropriately. Don't get too dressed up. So
Involved putting bags on your shoes, and was a little concerned that we had some different kind of rodents in the home that we were going to. And Jessica, you were such a good sport. You had a smile on your face, and she was eager to jump right in. And
So what was it that you were there to treat? Because people are going to say, what were you doing? Because when you show up to someone's house and there are rodents inside and putting bags on your shoes, I'm assuming so that you didn't step in something that you didn't want to step in?
Well, you couldn't actually step on the floor. We were stepping on trash and grocery bags filled with groceries. So we were there to treat someone who had had a brain injury, and things just got overwhelming. And so she would do grocery shopping and had all of these great intentions, and she'd come home so exhausted, and she'd set the bags down and set things down, and then it was too much to go through. And so then she'd have to sleep. So her house just got unmanageable, and to the point where it really looked like an episode of Hoarders. Like, if you can imagine that visual, it was really kind of that extreme. So Debbie actually said, all right, so we grab these pans and we hit them together before we walk in, just to scare any rodents that might be in there. And after my day, I think
this was your first day on the job.
Was my first day. And after my day, I went home and I was like, wow, yeah, I want to do that. I think that says a little bit about me, right? You're probably judging me at this point, but it was amazing. We made a difference in one day. We made a difference. And
That's incredible.
Yeah.
You met that person where they were at. And that's one thing that I think is so unique about this team of women, is that we're able to meet the clients and the people we work with where they're at. And we also make sure that that person feels human and heard, and they don't feel ashamed. That kind of opens up one of the other things that I think is so unique about our team and this podcast, is that we're going to talk a lot about unmasking deficits. And what does that mean? I'm going to open up this discussion. What does unmasking deficits mean to you?
Well, I think for me, I have had several clients that their lives depended on masking their deficits. I have one amazing client who was a practicing professional, a single mom at the time of her accident. And if she admitted that she had a brain injury with her job, she would have lost it. And then she couldn't have taken care of her child. So for decades, she hid that injury. And whenever we finally started therapy together, and she'd had other therapy, but when we started therapy together, we started talking about how talking about those deficits could actually lead to real world gains. And so we started talking about, how do you tell people about your deficits, and how do you tell them to help you through those deficits so that you can go out into the world and be successful?
Yeah, and she had to trust you to be able to open up to those deep, dark secrets that most people have and are ashamed to talk about.
And that's what I respect the most about our clients. I think there is beauty in being vulnerable, but it's a lot of being very brave.
Sure.
And I admire that.
Debbie, what about your clients that have opened themselves up? I know you have some really special relationships with clients that you've treated over the years. And can you share something about trust and how that plays a part of unmasking deficits?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest thing with brain injury is a lot of our clients are embarrassed. And it's heartbreaking when you go into a home and you see it in the state of, what Jessica described earlier. And it's so empowering to be able to go into a home and get somebody to trust you on a level that they open up to be able to be vulnerable. And once you get to that vulnerable state, it really opens up doors for the client to be able to be a productive member of society. And it also is always a learning curve. So, Courtney pointed it out a little bit that when you go into these homes, these are people living with family and grandkids and kids, and they're sharing their lives with you. And it's so amazing to be a part of that. And we learn so much more from people that we interact with in our jobs that we ever teach them. Even just observing in the situation that I was in with Jessica, we went into somebody's home, and one of the things about brain injury that I was trying to let Jessica observe, there was no floor space, but this client had gone to the store and bought carpet cleaner. And Jessica's question to me was, why did she buy carpet cleaner if there's no exposed carpet? And that's how your brain works when it's damaged. And we work on neuroplasticity and things that heal the brain, which I'm so excited about to use this podcast as a platform to talk about.
Absolutely. And you brought up something really special and meaningful. And part of why we started working together 12 years ago was because we recognized that someone can come into a clinic and tell you everything's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
They can come into a clinic and they can tell you, yeah, I made eggs for breakfast and I made this for dinner and my house is clean. And then you go and you look in their fridge and food is expired. They have no groceries. That is one really unique thing that we discovered years ago, is that it's so important to get into the homes of these people. And because we aren't a typical clinic, and I'm talking about Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center where we're all employed, but this is our experience that we're able to take from that employment carries over into this Brainthropology podcast that is a separate company, but we're using our experience that we have going into homes, sharing intimacy on such a deep level with these patients that have opened their lives to us. And we get to share that with the listening community, and we get to share all the strategies. One thing, Debbie, I want to talk about this a little bit more, but Debbie is a joy giver. Debbie is that person who sends the message that you need to hear in the morning. We have a group text, and we've had it for many, many years, the four of us. And it goes off every morning, probably around 5 or 6 a.m. And usually every night around 11 p.m. and throughout the day. And Debbie is that person that sends us, "Good morning, sunshine." And so, Debbie, I want to ask you, what is the most important question we ask our clients when we evaluate them?
Always ask what brings you joy. That is what defines us as therapists, and what brings us together is what brings you joy. If you can't answer what brings you joy, we need an intervention, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I know some people have said, I didn't even know what joy was. Like, I have to find what joy is to even know what brings me joy, because they're so dark and they've been injured maybe for so long that they forget what that joy even feels like.
Absolutely. And it's so wonderful to see when it comes out. I mean, to see a grandparent play with their grandchild for the first time post-injury, I mean, talk about the feels, you know, how many times have we cried during therapy sessions? So it's
Weekly.
Yeah.
Daily sometimes?
Twice a day.
We cry a lot,
Yeah.
but it's because we really are feeling the joy and feeling that journey with them. So Debbie, I'm going to just start by introducing you. You are an occupational therapist and our community director. You also are a breath of sunshine and a very dear friend to our team. What brings you joy?
What brings me joy? So many things that I've learned has brought me joy through this job and throughout my life. I would say my number one joy bringers, obviously my family, my friends, helping people, laughter, sunshine. And if you know me, you'll know that being by any body of water brings me joy. Probably the number one thing, though, is just being a part of a bigger picture in this world. And I think that's probably one of our common themes amongst the therapists at this table. So
I love that. You are joy. You're joy to so
Thank
many
you.
of us.
You're going to make me cry.
Hey, we probably will cry today. Dr. Jessica Smith, you've really worked hard to get your doctorate of occupational therapy, overcome a lot of challenges in that process, and you are just an empath. If there's anyone that is the biggest prayer warrior and empath, it would be you. I want to know, Jessica, what brings you joy?
Definitely family, friends, being around family and friends, time with them. I learned that time with the ones we love is precious and sometimes too short. Laughing and helping other people. I get so much joy being able to help people. Like, I am a giver and I love to give. I don't receive well. But I love to give help. And so just, you know, my career as an occupational therapist has been that, but really I also receive a lot from my clients too. So in that way I do, I receive joy from them, you know, just there seeing them light up and all of that, but definitely family and friends. And I'm lucky and blessed to call you three family and friends.
Likewise. Courtney Wang, Clinical Director of Galaxy Brain and Therapy Center, and she brings us a piece of the South, the charm of the South, the calmness of the South, but the attitude of an Ann Arbor hippie. What I love about Courtney is her parenting style is amazing. She has two children who might dress with one shoe one day along with the boot on the other foot. Mm-hmm. They might wear pajamas. They are free spirits because you really empower independence in your children, and it is beautiful. They are amazing. I think one of your children is probably going to be president someday.
Oh, thanks.
I hope
Hopefully
so.
they brush their hair by then.
Yeah, well, I hope so. You're an OT. You should teach that. Courtney, what brings you joy?
Oh, I am a happy person. I am very fortunate that way. First, my family, I'm going to be that person who repeats what all of us have said, but I have a spouse who supports me. I have kids who I just can't get enough of. I was one of the weird people in the pandemic. I was just happy to be home with them even more. I can't believe Jessica didn't say this, but my fur babies, I'm an animal person through and through. Like, I need to be touching an animal at least 50% of my day. And I take my dog with me to work, and he brings people joy all throughout the day. My job, people get shocked when I just talk about how much I love my job, to the point I think I talk about it so much I just recruit for our company all the time. So I go to parties and I'm like, oh, I found somebody else. Or I go pick up boxes for a client and I find somebody else too. But my sessions are rejuvenating for me. I find that there's two types of therapists, some that are just drained at the end of the day, and I am thrilled at the end of the day when I have a good session and I know that I've done something to make a difference. I think my love language is acts of service, and that makes me completely thrilled every day.
Yeah.
But I'm going to flip the question on you, Meg. What brings you joy?
Well, likewise, you all mentioned family. I think I have really deep family roots that are full of love all the way back to my great-grandparents. I still have a great grandmother alive today who's 94 and recently lost my nanny about a month ago. But she really taught me to love the person in front of me. And I feel like that does give me the greatest amount of joy. And loving strangers and blessing people, when that bill comes at the end of the day, I love tipping people. I love going over and above because I feel like making people feel appreciated is so important. And it just brings me so much joy. So I think seeing the way this team has come together and how we've grown from a very small company that met at Panera and the world was our office to seeing this comprehensive clinic come together. And as much as we love each other at this table, the family is extended to our physical therapy and speech therapy and mindfulness and mental health team members. And it just brings me so much joy to have a work family as well as a personal family that is really meaningful. So I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the name of this podcast, because I think we've all probably had to practice saying Brainthropology. What comes to mind? I know that we bought this and about 75 other domain names about 5 years ago, trying to be prepared for this day to come. What comes to mind when you hear the word Brainthropology?
Well, for me, I think it starts with a little bit of science. It's the study of the brain and how it can change over time. I think it's a fun word to say, but that's me. I'm thinking a little bit of science, a little bit of learning about the person and that evolution.
It's rooted in people, right? We want to know about people, and the brain is how people work. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me, is our brain is everything about us and how we are as people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, how they're intertwined together.
Yeah. Well, do you want to know the definition of the brain? Because we love the brain. And so I thought, I wonder how much Webster Dictionary loves the brain. Like how much clout do they give the brain? So Webster Dictionary says the brain is an organ of soft nervous tissue contained in the skull of vertebrates, functioning as the coordinating center of sensation and intellectual and nervous activity. So I thought they did a pretty good job. It's very sciencey, but basically the brain is in charge of everything. All of our senses, all of our feels, all of our coordination, all of our movement, all of our thinking, all of our emotions. So the brain really is so powerful, and it's such an integral part of satisfaction and joy in life. So then I thought, okay, what about anthropology? Also a noun, the study of human societies and cultures and their cultural development, the study of human biological and physiological characteristics and their evolution. So again, I looked at that and I thought we have to really be culturally sensitive when we're coming into people's homes. Everyone's home is its own culture and its own space. And from a neurodevelopmental standpoint and from a functional standpoint, it is just the perfect combination of those two words for what we're going to do in our podcast. So I think we love the brain and we love people. And so we thought it was the perfect made up word. Right? So practice saying it, Brainthropology.
Definitely.
Yeah. So one thing that I think we really are passionate about is inviting the community and our listeners to be a part of our community. So I thought in order for someone to feel like family, I think they really need to get to know us. And I'm going to ask you guys to be a little vulnerable, maybe a little raw, but also really give us thoughts on your purpose for being here. So the first vulnerable question I'm going to ask you is, and it's kind of fun too, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
So initially I was thinking like it would be so fun to teleport, right? But that seems a little shallow. So, I mean, I'm always running late and always like trying to fit too much into time I don't have. So that would be cool. But in really thinking about this, I think of people so often. Like, I rarely listen to music on the radio when I drive. Sometimes I'll listen to podcasts, but sometimes I'll drive in silence and just think. So I think my superpower would be if I could like tell people or send a text message every time, like automatically without actually sending the text message, because I'm not that great at replying to text sometimes. I'll read them and be doing something. But if every time I thought of someone, it would just tell them what I was thinking, like, driving down the road, Meg, you are amazing. You have done so much in your life. You are busy mom of 3, and I just adore all of your thoughtfulness, your empathy, everything. And it just automatically sent that message. That would be my superpower.
If we
could just let people know every time I thought about people, they would feel it, right? Feel everything. And I think that would be my superpower, because I'm not the greatest about telling people that all the time. I think it, and then I get busy and I don't always send that text message I'm meaning to send and all of that. So my superpower would be like automatically texting people my thoughts.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I wish we could market that and package that.
Watch, we get a call from Apple.
That's right.
People would really be freaked out if we started texting our thoughts, right?
That's right. Debbie, what is your superpower?
Ooh, superpower. I guess if I had a superpower, it'd probably be one of 2 different ones. Either the ability to take people's pain away. I do have a hard time seeing people in pain. That is a tough one for me. Or quite the opposite, to make someone smile. So if I actually thought this out, I probably would have a yellow cape with a big smiley face on it. No leotard, but definitely a yellow cape with a smiley face, just to make people smile. That probably would be my superpower.
Yeah. You are a joy giver. And every time I see a smiley face, I think of you.
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah, for sure. You and Shirley both.
Yeah.
What's your superpower, Courtney Wang?
Well, according to Jessica Smith over here, mine is being calm. And I feel like I'm able to kind of project that onto people. And there's a person in a vampire movie that does this, and it's his superpower. So it's kind of cheesy. But I would consider mine being able to stay calm in a storm, and then helping to help other people have that same sensation. So I feel like that would be my superpower, is being calm, which would balance Debbie's joy.
Yes, and you are my calm. I think you are my like yin and yang. So when I get lots of ideas in my head and have a million directions to go and get emotional about something, you definitely center me, and you are calm for a lot of people.
Yeah. We talk it out, and then we sit on it, and then we move forward with the right ideas. That's the way to roll.
That's right. That's right. I would say my superpower is working in my sleep. I don't know if that's a superpower, but just ideas come to me so fast and so furious that I think that I just have so many thoughts and so many desires that I think having a team around me that helps process all of those and integrate those and implement those is really important, because I can come up with a lot of things, but I think it requires a team to process those. So unfortunately, I think it's working in my sleep. And also I think it's probably connecting with strangers. And I think that's your superpower too. We share that superpower, connecting with strangers.
Yeah, I love talking to strangers all the time, and it freaks everybody else out.
Right, right. Well, it's something that we're good at.
Mm-hmm.
So the other question I want to ask you is a little bit vulnerable, but what are you afraid of? It could be related to this podcast. It could be a fear in general. What are you afraid of, Debbie?
I honestly, I'm absolutely petrified of public speaking, which seems so counterintuitive to what we're doing today. Even in college, I never enjoyed it, but honestly, sharing this information is such a great motivator to become vulnerable, because it's so important that we get this information out there to help people. Sharing this podcast is just too important not to do it. So thanks for helping me become vulnerable, ladies. Here we go.
Yeah, we'll go off script a few times and give you some practice. Courtney.
I'm actually afraid to be vulnerable. That's why I admire it as a trait in my clients so much. I think I have branded myself as the person who can do anything, and that's core to my identity. And so when I admit that I can't do everything, and my kids were the ultimate lesson in that, where I can't just carry the Costco cart and my baby who's sleeping and load my car and do 10 other things at the same time. So I have learned that admitting that I'm not perfect and that I have weaknesses is something that I need to do and be able to do with grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica, what are you afraid of?
Failing, putting myself out there and failing. And I think part of that comes with, I'm afraid of being judged by people too. I secretly was like, oh, maybe the podcast studio will lose power and I don't have to do this podcast and put myself out there. And then I stopped and thought, that's probably what a lot of our people that we go evaluate on the first day that they're going to meet me. And like this time it's flipped and I'm the one that has this fear and I have to be vulnerable today. And Absolutely. Then I was excited to do it because I kept looking forward to it as a challenge. Like I get to go do something hard for me. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm not going to lie. I was secretly hoping maybe there would be no power here.
I love that you tied that to how it feels for a client to have an evaluation, because that is it's so raw for a client to come in and speak to a stranger about things the issues that are going on and things that are happening. And even when you think about getting a history, clients' histories are complicated. So histories can be a history of abuse, a history of neglect. They don't always have a good support system. And so I love that you brought that up, because our listeners probably feel very raw and very vulnerable and very scared to even admit that they need help.
The thing is, I kind of knew the questions you would ask me ahead of time. Our clients don't know. And I kept telling myself, Jessica, you know what we're going to talk about today, and you still have this fear. Like, imagine your clients who have no clue what's about to happen, and they let you come into their home and ask questions that are hard and raw. So it gave me the courage to be here.
And that goes back to your superpower of empathy.
True. Absolutely. And I think part of our podcast is going to be designed around that evaluation. And so we're going to be tackling topics that are about our social situations and about our histories and about our emotional support and about our community or lack thereof. So the questions that we ask in the evaluation are not going to be the typical questions that you're going to hear at a outpatient clinic or an orthopedic clinic, because we know to ask questions that no one's ever asked, because we care at a deeper level. And we've been doing brain injury rehab specifically I've been doing it for over 20 years. So there's a lot of questions that we know to ask that other places might not. I'll give you my fear. My fear has always been, I think, rejection. I think I put a really tight circle of armor on. I have a small circle of trust and a tight armor that I feel like I just don't want rejection. I think I try and protect myself from pain. And that's something that our clients go through, people watching this podcast go through. Physical pain, mental pain, and for certain rejection, because they're not the person they were. And sometimes you're rejecting yourself. So I think those are two things that I can honestly say I am fearful of. Courtney, why do you think this podcast is so needed?
For me, I have had the privilege of living in several different states. I grew up in Georgia. I did my training there. I moved out to Colorado for fun, and then moved back to Georgia and worked. And then I've been here in Michigan. And for me, it's truly seeing how the services that we've been fortunate enough to have here in Michigan because of those auto no-fault laws, which are now changing. I saw people in Georgia who were in car accidents and completely paralyzed from the neck down, who I was allowed to do 3 therapy sessions with. And what can you tell a family in 3 therapy sessions? I can barely teach them about bed mobility and preventing bed sores. I can't even get into any quality of life. And I have so many clients that I used to see in Georgia for just a few sessions that I still think about to this day. They break my heart because there's so much more to life than just surviving. I'm also think because of the changes to our laws here, which are leaving so many of our clients with less and less therapy and less support, I think that we can help share with them some ideas that hopefully give them hope that it's not just about surviving, but it's about finding that joy again and doing it in a way that brings in your family and everything around you so that that life is a life that you're not just surviving, you're thriving.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you that this podcast can be an affordable healthcare solution for some people whose benefits have been exhausted or whose family members just don't know how to help their loved one or don't know how to help themselves. And so what's so exciting about this podcast is our plan is to allow for nuggets of information. We'll talk about a topic. We'll have nuggets of information and takeaways that each person will be able to take home with them and try and apply. Also, we'll have a part B and a mindfulness practice that people can use, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I love that it's a part of affordable healthcare. Jessica.
I want our listeners to know that there's medical professionals out there like us that care deeply. We want you to be vulnerable. We're willing to be vulnerable. And I think that developing that genuine, authentic relationship and knowing that exists is important and will help people say, I want someone who asks the question, what brings you joy? And if they're not finding that in their rehab or if they're not finding that for their loved one, look elsewhere, and it doesn't have to be us, but there are people that exist that care deeply. We all blend into those we treat in those people's lives and their families. And I think that is really important to get the message out that, that's something that is important to a lot of medical professionals. And we have a lot of tools to share. And so I just want listeners to be able to integrate those tools into their lives. You 3 have helped me be a better mom because you have tools that you've used. I develop things with my clients and then I go home and use them. So I think brain injury, no brain injury, someone in rehab, someone not in rehab, we can all use a lot of these practical solutions that we'll be talking about on this podcast. And so I'm excited for that.
So Jess, you brought up one thing when you're talking about you wanted to inspire other people, but I think it would be nice to note that we can inspire other therapists because I've had jobs where I was supposed to just I felt like a factory worker where they wanted more and more units out of me. And it made it hard. And to know that there's jobs where you can actually put your heart and soul into it and have that support from your employers. I mean, Meg, you're truly genuinely like a rare find in that world, but those jobs are out there. And the therapist too, like we can be more than just trying to get through each one of those sessions too.
Absolutely. I do hope that we inspire therapists. I guess I'll talk about my reason why I think we need the podcast, and then I'll go to you, Debbie. You stole part of my thunder because part of my reason for wanting the podcast is really to inspire therapists. Because I think, I'm not going to say there's lazy therapist. I think there's lazy therapy. And I think a lot of people are discharged because a therapist is out of tools in their toolbox. And I've mentioned this in another podcast I was interviewed in, but therapists, if you do not empower someone to replace therapy with something meaningful at the time of discharge, then you haven't done your job. And so I think if we can give therapists tools, and I also think it's needed because we really geek out on neuroplasticity and the brain. And so we attend courses. We are always looking for ways that we can improve outcomes and we can get that brain and body healed better, both psychologically, after trauma, after physical injuries and deficits. And so I think this podcast is needed because if we don't challenge the brain isn't going to get better. And so I think there's a lot of evidence out there that we can be sharing with the listening community, both therapists and caregivers. Debbie.
Yeah, on the same wavelength. I'm just really excited to have a platform to share free information that's functional. And I know we've mentioned clients a few times, but I think it's really important that we can use this in our everyday life. You know, Jessica, you touched base on it, but I can just see myself walking with friends and somebody asking, you know, my mom's having some memory issues. And I'm like, oh, that's episode 35. You need to take a look at this episode. And, you know, really giving back to the community. And like I said, more daily life functional things. When you can address some of those issues, then it makes room for the important things that bring people joy. And I feel as an occupational therapist, we have so many valuable experiences and resources. And when we share them, the podcast gives us a platform to be able to, you know, share it with even more people. So many people have been in so many different difficult situations. And I think if we've helped one person or one listener, then I think we've done what we've set out to do with this podcast. So that's what excites me about it.
I agree. And Debbie, you bring such a unique ability to see the type of tools that people need. We've talked about some clients needing that paper planner that do you still carry around a paper planner?
I do.
So most of us have converted to a iPhone for our scheduling, but thank God we have Debbie who still loves her paper planner. But we have clients that love the paper planners, right?
Absolutely.
And so I love that the tools that we're going to share are both tools such as paper planners and labels and, you know, really fundamental tools. And then we have people like Jessica and Courtney who are very techie, who might be able to share the more recent apps or strategies or streamline the IT part of occupational therapy.
Yeah, because it's important to meet people with what they're comfortable with. If I put them out of their comfort zone, if I want to go high tech with Debbie,
watch out.
She's come along with a ride with me. We call each other, right? So that way we know that there is a paper planner out there that's better for them, and she can tell me the best one for a client in a certain situation who has these needs. And if we have a client who's more into technology, we meet them there. We find where they are in the moment, and then we build with their strengths first, and then we kind of push the bounds with them and maybe structure that out a little bit more. But we start with where they are.
Yes, absolutely. Jessica, what are some topics you want to cover in the podcast?
Well, you mentioned the word neuroplasticity, and I actually last week gave one of my clients the homework of looking up what that word meant. And we kind of hear it thrown around, but what does it really mean? It means our brain has this amazing capability to really rewire. So I'm excited to talk about that more. And those authentic, genuine connections, right? Like, how do we build them, what they look like, really sharing some of our stories, because those are the emotional, raw things that you talked about we experience. So I'm excited to bring some of those up, during this podcast, and really looking at, the brain develops in utero. So we have from in utero to all the way to, I always tease my grandma, she's going to be 108. So you hang in there, grandma. But really we have tools to help anyone and everyone from in utero. And I did some of the brain exercises that I helped my clients with when I was pregnant. So hopefully my kids in utero got some of that. And then to all the way to 108, really helping people across the lifespan. And I think we have tools for all of that, all of those ages, and so many different populations. And I'm really excited to talk about all of the tools we have.
Absolutely. I know I thought I was going to be a pediatric therapist. And when I graduated from school and I went to so many continuing education classes that were all based on neurodevelopment and sensory integration and working with the little kiddos. And then I met my first client that was 45. And I ended up not just specializing in pediatrics, but there's so many kids that we can see now and that we can treat, and that neuroplasticity, neurodevelopment, and I'm really excited to talk about reflex integration. You mentioned also the community of people and the different populations, and I think caregivers and parents are a huge population that doesn't get enough attention. And so I think in every episode, we're also going to be talking about the issues that come with those relationships and that community that each client and caregiver plays and the role they play in helping initiate some of the tools we talk about.
I use it as a parent. I have a squirrely 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old little boy. I use some of my reflex integration that I've learned. I use a lot of strategies with my own children too. So I'm definitely excited to talk about that as a parent, how I've used some of these things that we're going to talk about. I just recommended the book, The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline to a friend of mine, and I'm excited to talk about those things. So I think it will relate to so many listeners on a variety of levels.
Absolutely. You know, I think some of the things that I'm really passionate about us covering is incorporating meaningful activities and helping clients give back, because all of us are healthcare professionals. We all are passion-driven and service-driven, and maybe we didn't all mention it, but we all get so much joy from giving back and being a part of something bigger than ourselves. And if you think about all of the people who have an injury or an illness or a diagnosis of cancer or some progressive neurological disease that can no longer do the thing that makes them happy and do the thing that they love and do something to give back, there's a real emptiness that comes with working on yourself all the time. So I would love to motivate both therapists, caregivers, and people to find something that is meaningful to them and be a part of something bigger than themselves. And that kind of goes along with mental health, comorbidity, addiction, depression, anxiety, trauma. Those are all things that I think all of our clients have experienced at least some aspect of those, as well as grief and loss. Those are all such huge parts that when you go to a typical therapy clinic, those aren't the things that are talked about. You know, they want to get your hands better and they want to get you your handwriting better if you're a kid, and they don't talk about those important things that I think we're going to cover. And I think we break the rules. We don't do OT the traditional way. We're rule breakers, and I think that's going to serve us well on this podcast. So the last question I want to ask all of you is, what do you want the listeners to know about your heart, and what is your heart for this project?
Well, for me, I think that I've kind of said it before on here. I really enjoy making a difference in someone's life. And I feel like this is an opportunity for us who we get to do it on a one-on-one basis in therapy, but I see people for an hour at a time, sometimes longer. There's only so many people I can reach in a day. And if there's a way to, and hopefully this is the way, to reach more people at one time with something that can help, because, you know, Jess mentioned we go through and we're kind of making this up as we go. We work with our clients. It's not a super regimented schedule. We see, oh, this is your problem. Let me think of 2 ways that would work. Which way do you prefer? And then we just try it out. But then I see it work with my clients. And then I try it out at home with my kids. My husband was laughing at me because I had a packing list for our children for summer camp that just started. And he was like, this is such an OT thing to do. And I was like, this is a mom thing to do to maintain her sanity so I don't nag my children and I get a better relationship with them. So if any of these tools that we can do and help more people, to me, that's my heart for this project.
I love that. Debbie, what's your heart for this project?
I would say focusing on gratefulness, just being able to use this as a platform, as I said before, as therapists. I think so many people, well, just us group of people, we have touched each other in so many different ways. We've had friends that have made such an impact on our lives, family. And I think it would be so amazing if we use this podcast to leave a legacy of positivity. I mean, we have so many different topics that hopefully we're going to touch people and serve it, for friends, for family, anybody that would benefit this information, including clients as well. So it's very exciting.
Didn't you do your master's thesis on positive psychology?
Happiness, and then positive psychology kind of came into the mix 7 or 8 years ago. It's a very interesting story.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive into that later. Jessica.
I have seen people at their worst. They let me in their homes at their worst, and then I have seen them at their best. And I just want to share that with listeners. Like, I am that person that loves hearing the emotional stories and like, tell me more. And obviously without using names because we have to follow privacy rules, but I've been able to tell some of my family members, like, I've seen people at their lowest of lows, and this same person got to do this week, and I was part of that. And so, throughout my journey as a therapist, I've been able to go along the ride with so many people, again, from like that lowest point to their most successful day. And I just want to share that because that's my heart. That's how my heart has grown. And then my family's, I have 2 kids and a husband that's amazing and has really supported me in doing this job because I don't leave work at work very well. I take it home. And he is so supportive. So just really kind of sharing my family with all of you and how, my job and all of that. I'm excited.
I love that. And I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what you said. I really think it's so important for this to be a platform that clients and those who have experienced trauma can tell their story. So on this podcast, we plan on having people who we've worked with or people who have experienced childhood trauma. It's not just going to be us talking. It's going to be giving people the power to tell their story. And the cool thing about Speakeasy, this production studio, is that we can have 4 people here on studio, but we can have up to 10 people joining our podcast virtually. So I think that really is, my heart is giving a voice to people who often aren't heard and letting people tell their story because it's so powerful for people to be able to tell their story. And I also think, again, meeting people where they're at, loving the person in front of you. I think that the mindfulness piece to this podcast is going to be so important in helping meet people where they're at, because some people are going to be able to pick up the tools and strategies that we talk about, and they're going to say, all right, I'm going to go get a label maker. That was a great idea. And I'm going to start labeling my kitchen. And then there's other people that are going to feel like, man, I can't even get off the couch, or I don't go to the store. I don't have money for a label maker. I don't know what I'm going to do. And that part B, that mindfulness part B that addresses the topics that allows people to just start to mentally prepare themselves to be able to make change, I think is going to be so valuable. So I just want to thank you. Did you have something to say, Jessica?
Can you give us a glimpse of what that part B might look like? Like, can you talk about that mindfulness piece?
Sure.
For just a second?
Sure. So imagine that we talk about anxiety and we talk about what happens in your body, like your physical body response to anxiety. And we talk about that emotional response. And then we talk about strategies and how to get through that. That part B would be a mindfulness practice where we practice deep breathing, where we practice some physical strategies, some physical relaxation and mindfulness strategies to do in the moment. And then maybe the next week we talk about anxiety related to grocery shopping, public transportation, getting in crowds, going to a birthday party that's loud, and getting back into situations that are sensory stimulating. And maybe that mindfulness practice would be visual imagery. Imagine yourself smiling at someone you don't know, and then they smile back, and it feels good. So I am not the mindfulness practitioner. We actually have a retired neuropsychologist, Barbara Branca, who is our mindfulness practitioner, and she's going to be leading those. But that's a little bit of what I'm really excited about and where my heart is in creating a podcast that no one else does.
You know, our hearts are really in this, and we would like to connect with everyone out there. So I want everyone to know that you can look in the show notes for information on how to reach us. And you can also email us at brainthropology@gmail.com.
Correct. And in future sessions, our show notes will include handouts and information about our sponsors and links to cool books and authors that we think you should know about. So to end, I think I'll just end with listeners, therapists, caregivers, family members, my Galaxy family. Be courageous and move forward in your day with hope, joy, and purpose.
While we love what we do and are as passionate as they come, the information on this podcast and discussion is for educational purposes only and should not replace professional medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare provider if you are seeking medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment for you or anyone else. We do our very best to provide correct information, but please understand science and medicine is ever changing. We welcome feedback, comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. This disclaimer applies to any guest or contributors to the podcast or blog.